What if I told you that almost every line of code in this game was written by an AI? This is Stranded Survival, an isometric pixel art survival game built in Godot 4. You wake up on a procedurally generated island, you chop trees, mine rocks, craft tools, build bonfires, and try not to starve, dehydrate, or freeze to death when night falls. For years, I've wanted to develop my own game. I've spent countless hours buried in tutorials, trying to make sense of syntax and logic, often feeling like I was getting nowhere. But this time, it was different. I built the entire thing using Claude as my AI coding partner. No more tutorial loops. I stopped watching and started building. No Stack Overflow. I didn't spend hours hunting for cryptic bug fixes. Pure description. I simply described the world I wanted to create, and the AI translated my imagination into functional code. It turns out I didn't need to master every nuance of GD script. I just needed to know how to talk to my partner. Here's how that went. It started with a simple idea. I wanted to make a cozy survival game, something like a tiny, accessible version of Don't Starve, but isometric and mobile-friendly. I chose Godot 4 as the engine because it's free, open source, lightweight, and has great 2D support. For the art style, I went with pixel art, partly because I love the aesthetic and partly because it's the most realistic scope for a solo project. Now here's the thing, I'm not a professional game developer. I know the basics, but writing a full game from scratch with shaders, procedural generation, crafting systems, and AI pathfinding, that's a different level entirely. So instead of spending months learning every system, I decided to use Claude, Anthropic's AI assistant, as my co-developer. I would describe what I wanted in plain language, and Claude would write the GD script code, design the architecture, and help me debug issues in real time. The workflow was surprisingly natural. I'd say something like generate a circular island with a sand beach and a freshwater lake, or implement a knife. With the knife, you can do woodwork and get new technologies like a fishing rod. And within seconds, I'd have working code, not pseudocode, not suggestions, actual running Godot scripts. The foundation of the game is the island itself, and it's completely procedurally generated. Every time you start a new game, a random seed creates a unique island. The generator starts with a circular shape, then carves out a sand beach around the edges and fills the center with grass. A freshwater lake is generated using a flood fill algorithm that creates organic, natural-looking water bodies. Then comes the decoration pass. Trees in different growth stages, bushes with berries, tall grass, old tree stumps, rocks on the grass, sand-colored rocks on the beach, water lilies floating on the lake, underwater grass, and even fish swimming around with their own little AI. All of this is built on Godot's isometric tile map layer system with 32 by 16 pixel tiles. Every object is placed procedurally with collision checks. Nothing overlaps, nothing spawns in the water, and there's always a valid spawn point for the player. The cool part? I could just describe rules like old trees should never spawn near the lake or sand rocks need to stay away from the ocean edge, and Claude would implement the exact spatial checks needed. Things that would normally take me hours of trial and error were done in minutes. The core gameplay loop revolves around 4 survival stats: health, hunger, thirst, and comfort. Hunger and thirst drain constantly. When they hit 0, you start taking damage. You can eat berries from bushes or carrots and potatoes found in tall grass. For water, you walk into the lake and drink directly. Comfort is the most interesting system. During the day, it drains slowly, but at night, it drops fast. If your comfort hits 0, you take cold damage. The solution? Craft a bonfire. The crafting system lets you combine resources into tools and items. 5 stones and 5 wood give you a bonfire. 2 sticks and a stone make an axe. The crafting menu shows what you can build, what ingredients you need, and grays out recipes you can't afford yet. When you place a bonfire, it creates a dynamic point light with a flickering fire effect. The light smoothly fades in during dusk and fades out at dawn. No harsh on-off switching. Standing near a bonfire at night regenerates your comfort, keeping you alive through the cold. There's also a death vignette system. When your health drops below 35, the screen starts darkening from the edges with a reddish tint, narrowing your vision. It's a subtle but effective way to create tension without a giant flashing health bar. The day-night cycle is one of my favorite systems in the game. A full day takes 3 minutes of real time, cycling through sunrise, full daylight, sunset, dusk, and deep night. This isn't just a color filter. The entire island transforms. A canvas modulate node shifts the ambient color through carefully tuned phases. Warm orange at sunrise, neutral white during the day, deep orange at sunset, and a cold blue-purple at night. The trees even have a gentle wind sway animation driven by sine waves with randomized phases, so no 2 trees move in sync. It's a small detail, but it makes the island feel alive. All of this, the shadow math, the color transitions, the sway animation, was generated by AI based on my descriptions. I'd say make the shadows rotate like a real sun and get trigonometry code that just worked. For the visual assets, I used a combination of generation via OpenAI ChatGPT, Pixel Lab, and a little bit of hand drawing by myself, but overall an AI-powered pixel art generation service. Pixel Lab and ChatGPT can generate characters, tile sets, and game objects in a consistent pixel art style. I use these for things like the bonfire animation sprite sheet, rock variations, and UI elements. The outline shader is another piece that came together beautifully with AI help. When you target a tree or rock, it gets a white outline. When you hit it, the entire sprite flashes white for a split second. This uses a custom GLSL shader with uniforms for outline toggling, flash intensity, and alpha override, all controlled from GD script through tween animations. Getting shaders right is notoriously tricky. There was a fun bug where adding the outline shader broke tree transparency. When the player walks behind a tree, it should become semi-transparent, but the shader was overriding the alpha channel. Claude diagnosed the issue and added an alpha_override uniform to the shader so both systems could coexist. That's the kind of problem that could eat an entire afternoon. It was fixed in under 2 minutes. From the start, I wanted this to run on phones. Godot makes Android export relatively straightforward, but the real challenge is making the game feel good on a touchscreen. The UI needed a complete rethinking for touch. Click detection had to distinguish between taps and drags. I implemented a pending drag system with a pixel threshold. A short tap selects an item. Only after dragging 15 pixels does it start a drag operation. On desktop, that threshold is 8 pixels. Small difference, big impact on usability. The hotbar, inventory, crafting menu, pause menu, all of it had to work with fingers instead of mouse cursors. Items can be dragged between hotbar slots, and you can tap items in the inventory to see their descriptions. One of the last challenges was screen scaling. On high DP iPhones, the default 1280 by 720 viewport made everything microscopic. The fix was an auto-scaling system that detects the device's DPI at startup and reduces the viewport resolution accordingly. A phone with 400 DPI gets roughly half the viewport, making everything twice as large. The canvas_item stretch mode handles the rest automatically. So, what's it actually like building a game with AI? Honestly, it's the most productive I've ever been. Features that would normally take days were done in a single session. The AI doesn't get tired, doesn't lose context on how systems connect, and doesn't forget that one edge case you mentioned 3 hours ago. But it's not magic. You still need to be the designer. You need to know what you want, how game systems should feel, and when something isn't right. The AI is an incredibly fast executor, but the creative vision has to come from you. I went from a blank Godot project to a fully playable survival game with procedural generation, crafting, day-night cycles, dynamic lighting, and mobile support, not in months, in days. If you've ever wanted to make a game but felt overwhelmed by the technical side, this is the moment. The barrier to entry has never been lower. You bring the ideas, the AI brings the code. Stranded Survival is still in development, and I'm excited to keep pushing it further. If you want to follow the journey, hit subscribe. And if you try building something with AI yourself, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Thanks for watching.